Executing a speed ramp in DaVinci Resolve 17 is actually really easy to do. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do this in Resolve so you can start getting creative with your video editing and start spicing up your content. But just before we dive into today's tutorial, if you're coming back for another video, then thank you so much indeed for coming back and staying tuned. It's really great to have you here. On the other hand, if it's your first time here, then hey, I'm Alex, and I'm a certified DaVinci Resolve trainer and video producer, making videos about all things video production and video marketing, but especially videos about DaVinci Resolve. If you haven't already, then please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications so you'll never miss a video when I upload them. Okay, so what is speed ramping? Well, speed ramping is essentially the dynamic slowing down or speeding up of a part of your video to create a desired creative effect. I say dynamic because unlike a fixed or sudden speed change, generally speed ramping is just that. It's a ramp rather than, say, a wall.
Welcome to the wall!
That said, the ramp can have different characteristics depending on the need of your scene. Sometimes the change will come in suddenly and then usually smooth out and slow down, or conversely, it can come in slowly and then get faster, much more like a traditional ramp shape. I'm not quite sure I've ever said ramp quite so much in a short space of time. Speed ramping is largely used for creative effect and to draw specific attention to a detail, a moment, or a movement within the frame. Now that we've cleared that up, let's look at how we can perform a speed ramp in DaVinci Resolve 17. So here in Resolve, I've got a clip loaded up into the timeline, and what I want to do is just take a quick look at that clip and assess where we can use a speed change or a speed ramp for it. So a golfer hitting a golf shot and the sun coming through the trees. And this is really perfect because what we want to do in this instance is draw some attention to our backswing of our golfer here by slowing it right down so people can really see what's going on. So we can do that in a couple of different ways. And just firstly, I'm going to take 2 seconds just to quickly walk you through a way of doing this that pulls on some of the techniques that we looked at in the last video. And if you haven't seen that yet, there's a card in the top corner for that video. So go check that out and then you'll understand a little bit more about what I'm saying here. But basically what we want to do is isolate this separate section of his swing and make it its own clip and then just change that as if it was one clip. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to park my playhead at the point where his club starts to move. I'm going to then just break the clip apart by pressing Command and then backslash, and that's Control backslash on a PC. You could also use the blade edit mode just here, or you could use Command B on the keyboard or Control B on the keyboard. Absolutely fine. I'm now going to scrub through until he gets to the point where he's just starting his downswing, which is here. And I'm going to do the same thing again. So Command backslash to split the clip. And now I have essentially 3 clips. Although it's one clip, I've broken that middle section up into its own clip. And of course now I can treat it like its very own clip by right clicking, changing the clip speed, make sure that ripple sequence is on, and then change that to 50% for our speed change and hit change. You'll notice that everything has then been updated in the timeline. We now have a normal pace, then slow, and then normal pace clip. And we've got the speed change done, which is sort of what we wanted to do, but it's not particularly practical. And this is the main reason why. First of all, we have 3 separate clips now, which isn't particularly ideal. Of course, if you're working in color grading or just generally moving this particular clip around in the timeline, you've now got to kind of treat it as 3 separate clips, which isn't perfect. You could, of course, create a compound clip and then do it like that. That would work. But again, it's just another unnecessary step. The other issue that we have is it's not very easy to edit this particular speed change. What we can do is we can come up, change the clip speed and change the speed of the clip here, and that normally works okay. However, if we just wanted to change the edit point by just sort of rolling like we would do normally, you can see that this is not going to work because there's a big jump, and that's just because of the way that the speed clip and this clip are now not in tune with one another. So let's just put that back and look at the better way of doing this whole thing, and that's by using the Retime Controls. So I'm going to just redo a couple of steps. Now we're back to where we were before, and I'm going to right click and come up to Retime Controls. This is also accessible via Command R or Control R on the keyboard. You can also come up to Clip and then Retime Controls in the menu options as well. Now the Retime Controls we did see briefly in the last episode, and what you can see here is there's not a lot has changed, but we have got some extra information on the screen which helps us understand what's going on. So firstly, we've got these blue arrows along the top header, and these are blue, they're evenly spaced, and they're moving from left to right. They're pointing from left to right. That just basically denotes that we are moving in real time and we're progressing through the normal playback of the clip. You can see here this bottom icon also tells us that we're at 100%, and we have a little disclosure arrow here that gives us some different speed options that we can apply. So this one clip is actually now essentially one speed area. So this particular speed control here is going to change the entire clip, and obviously we don't want that. We need to add some different speed points. So to do that, we simply park our playhead where we want the speed change to start, which is just here. Come down to the little disclosure arrow, click it, and then add a speed point. You'll notice that we now get some new handles. If I just move my playhead out of the way, a new little indicator here with some new handles, a top and bottom handle. I'll come back to how those handles work in just a second. What I want to do first of all is create a secondary speed point. So the point where he starts coming down, I'm going to put another speed point here. You'll notice we've now got this here. We also have this here. So we've got two separate controls for the two separate speed areas that we're working with. So what we're going to do in this case, we're going to select this one, add a speed point, and now we've added a speed point where the playhead was sitting. So that's really good. We've now got 1, 2, 3 separate speed areas all within inside the same clip, and we've got the separate set of controls for all of those. Now the easiest way to make the speed change is simply to come to my area where I want the speed change to happen, click on the disclosure arrow, come down to the change speed, and you can see we've got some speed presets here. And as you can see, we've got 10, 25, 50, 75. These are all going to be slowing the clip down because they're below 100%, which is obviously the normal playback speed. Everything above that is obviously going to be speeding that little section of the clip up. And in this case by 110, 150, 200, 400 and 800%. These are presets, you can't unfortunately change them, but they are some of the most commonly used percentages when we're talking about speed changes. I will show you another way of doing this in just a little moment, but for the time being 50% is good enough for us. So let's hit that and you can see what's happened here. The overall clip has changed in duration, so it's now longer, which accommodates this little speed change that we've got going on in the middle here. And you can see that this side of the speed change hasn't been affected. Likewise, the end of the clip hasn't been affected. This speed area is still 100% playback speed. So if I just play that back, we've got normal and then slow and then normal again. So we're starting to get the look that we're after. We're not quite there yet, but you can see how this method is a lot more attractive to us than the previous method of splicing the clip open and then just doing a constant speed change on this particular area, because not only now have we got one clip, but it's actually very easy for us to change this edit and move the edit points around once we've now created them in this way of doing things, so within the retime controls. So let's just look at that. Let's just say actually we don't want just his backswing, we want the whole of his swing just about this point here to be in slow motion and slowed down. So let's look at how we can do that. We could add another speed point and then delete this one. That would work, but it's much easier just to simply grab this lower handle and drag it out. And we're going to drag it out until we're happy that we've got to the point of the clip that we want. So looking at the program monitor just to get a feel for where we are. There we go. I'm going to let go, and now you can see that we've affected that speed change. We'll just play it back. So normal, now slow, should be all the way through the swing now. There we go to the end. Perfect. Now back to normal speed. So very easy, just grabbing the lower handle moves that particular speed point. If you need to edit a particular speed point at all in terms of removing it and maybe adding a new one, it's very easy to do. What you have to bear in mind is that each speed control essentially is governing the speed point to its left. So in this case, there's no option to clear a speed point, but when I come here, there is an option to clear a speed point because that's the one that it's affecting over here on the left-hand side. So what I can simply do if I wanted to clear that, I simply come down to the controls here, clear speed point, and you'll notice it disappears. And actually the clip then retimes this a little bit to accommodate that initial part of the clip. Let me just put that back. Okay, let's just take a very quick break there for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I hope that's all making sense so far and that you're learning something new. If you are, then do just take a moment and give this video a like, as it really helps me out and it lets other people and YouTube know that this video is worth a watch. Plus, it's totally free to do and takes 2 seconds, so it's a big win all round, right? I also just wanted to add that if you're enjoying the videos and you're wondering where you can get more great training on DaVinci Resolve with me, then please do check out the DaVinci Resolve online courses that I have just released on pre-sale. They're certified by Blackmagic Design, they cover a range of different Resolve features and in much greater detail than is possible here on YouTube. So whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro moving to DaVinci Resolve for the first time, or just someone who wants to up their level of expertise, then there really is a course for everybody. Currently the courses are on pre-sale as I'm just putting the finishing touches onto the content, but until they are all published, I'm offering 50% off every single course. So it's a great time to grab yourself a deal, and you'll be given full access as soon as they're ready. In fact, if you purchase on the pre-sale, then you'll get earlier access than everybody else, and I'll be throwing in a couple of surprises and bonuses for you guys too. Okay, break time over. Speed ramping part 2 coming up. So we now know a little bit about what the bottom handle does, but let's have a look at what the top handle does. And the top handle essentially is to control the speed change of the particular speed area just to the left of the handle. So if we wanted to, and you know before I mentioned that you could come down and obviously change the speed using one of these presets, but let's say one of these presets wasn't the right type of preset for you, and let's say 60% is the speed we wanted this middle area to be playing back at, then we'd have to come to this top handle, grab it and drag it. And you'll notice that that little number is moving at the bottom, and you can see it's now 60%. And this is great because now we're at 60%. I've just used the handle to drag. The whole clip has got slightly shorter because obviously we've sped the clip up ever so slightly. And now we have this clip here playing at normal, then 60%, then back to 100% again. So this top part is to affect the speed change of that particular section to the left. And again, similarly, this section here gets affected if I drag this one. So you can see how that's being affected there. It's actually speeding up, slowing down. I'm just going to reset that. Of course, there isn't a speed handle at the end here, but if you notice that I've got my normal trim control here when I select the end of the clip. If, however, I come up, the cursor changes to show a double arrow. And this double arrow in the top header area indicates that now when I click and trim the clip, it's actually not going to trim the clip as such, but it's going to affect the speed of the clip section to the left. So when I drag it to the left, notice how I'm speeding the clip up, and actually you see the blue arrows are getting closer together and the numbers at the bottom are changing, and I'm now back to 200%. So now if I play through the clip, we have a clip that plays back at normal speed, then slows down, and then speeds up again. Let me just re-edit this position ever so slightly. What I want to do is put the edit point back by changing the edit point as we did before. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to roll that back so that the edit point here happens just as he reaches the top of his swing. I'm also going to change this section back to 50%. There we go. So I've now got a clip that plays back normal speed, half the speed, and then twice as fast through to the finish. And actually, let's add another point here. I'm going to add a speed point, and then I'm going to make it 100% speed. So I'm going to reset that section to 100. There we go. So now I've got my clip, normal, half the speed, twice the speed, back to normal again, which is really great. And you can see how we're starting to make it very neat and tidy indeed. Of course, the great thing is it's still all within inside one clip as well, which is really brilliant, because if I wanted to, I could start trimming, again, depending on how much source media I've got. There you go. So I can very easily trim the clip in and out depending on the type of edit that I'm going for. And it's just a lot simpler because, again, I'm just using one clip and I'm moving it around, and the speed changes are obviously all maintaining themselves throughout the duration of that clip. What you can also do is if you come over to the trim controls and you want to slide this clip for whatever reason, notice that when I slide the clip, it actually is moving. Now there's not a lot of source media here, but you'll notice that all the speed points are locked in place and they stay with the clip. So if I wanted to, I could then slip and slide the clip to my heart's content, and it would still all work neatly inside this one interface. Very handy indeed. So now one thing you might have noticed is that at the moment these speed changes are all still very abrupt. We haven't actually been able to smooth them out or properly ramp them, so they all happen quite abruptly. And we don't want that. We want them to be a bit more smooth and happen a little bit more neatly. And what we can do to really emphasize this is open up the retime curve. So simply select the clip, right click, and then come up to retime curve. When I click this, you'll see the curve editor appear beneath the clip. Now this is just the standard curve editor, but it's just defaulting to the retime frame. In fact, whilst we saw that there was no actual retime curve keyboard shortcut listed here, if you simply press Shift and C, it will appear and disappear as well. So the retime frame curve here is being displayed, and this is basically showing a diagonal pass or passage of time from bottom left corner to top right corner of the clip. The vertical axis actually represents each frame of a clip's source media, and the horizontal axis represents the frame of playback in the timeline. So this is a little bit of a complicated graph to look at, so normally not very helpful to show these speed changes here. So what I want to do is actually go to this little disclosure icon next to the name and choose a different curve. And this time we're going to come all the way down to retime speed. Down the bottom, we're going to turn off the frame, retime frame, turn on retime speed, and now you can see exactly what I'm talking about in the fact that these are all abrupt speed changes. But you'll notice how they are all perfectly in position and in sync with these speed points. So again, we're moving along here at 100%, then we drop down to 50%, then back up to 200, and then back to normal speed. And these are all very hard wall-like changes of speed, and we want to soften those off a little bit. And we change that very simply by selecting the point that we want to affect. You'll notice here that we have two icons. We have this one here, and now we have the rounded smooth or Bezier looking point. If we click that, you'll notice how this has now changed to show us a much smoother transition and then some handles as well. So let's just look at what we do there. You'll notice, first of all, if I just show the speed change, the speed change is a lot more gradual. It doesn't come in quite so harshly. And equally, if we use these handles and drag left and right, we can make it more abrupt, we can make it much smoother, and we can drag those out again to get the desired effect that we want. Note that basically this handle here, this point here, indicates this at this point is where the speed change is going to start happening. So you might want to just be aware in mind of that we actually are going to start seeing a speed change through that handle range. So let's just change some of the other ones. Change them over, smooth these points out. There we go. So you can see how we're going to go from 50%, we're going to ramp up. You can see that nice ramp happening up to 200%, and then we're going to ramp down to 100%. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to change this so it ramps down quickly from the fast to back to normal. And I'm going to keep this one as a fairly gradual one, and let's just see how that looks. There we go. So we now have our speed ramp working quite nicely for us. Something else I just wanted to quickly show you whilst I have the Retime Controls and the Retime Curve open is to show you that obviously we've looked at changing the speed change with the top handle. We've also looked at using the speed control point here to again change the speed this way, but there is another way that you can do it whilst the curve is open, and that's simply by taking this band here, and you can see at the moment if I hover over it, my cursor changes to two up and down arrows, and you can see that the return speed is 100%. If I grab this, you'll notice that this graph is showing currently 400 and minus 300. If I was to take the middle rubber band, grab it and drag it up, you notice what's happening. I'm changing my retime speed, and you can see the retime speed changing just next to the control points there above, and I'm slowly changing the speed, and I'm speeding it up, and you can see how that's being sped up, and there we go. So I've now sped up the clip even further just by using the rubber band, and you can see how also the clip's adjusting in its duration to accommodate that speed change. If I wanted to go all the way to the top, obviously I'd get to 400 and I'd reach my limit. Now what you can actually do, if I zoom in a bit closer so you can hopefully see this, if I go and hover over the area here where it's showing the actual number, you'll see I changed to a sideways arrow cursor. If I now drag this out, I can actually change that to, for example, 1000%. So now my graph is showing 1000% to minus 300%, and I can simply drag that up and keep going up and keep going up until again I reach the top of that particular graph point. Again, I can do the same in this one down below, and I can change how far you could potentially slow a clip down by as well. So now my graph parameters are minus 1000 by minus 1000, and then we can actually have more flexibility within inside this area of the retime curve. And when we're finished with the retime curve, we can simply close the curve editor by simply pressing Shift C, and then we can close the speed change out as well. And now you can see we've got the same speed change happening, but all nicely tidied with inside one clip. Let me just open the Retime Controls again just 1 second, because I want to show you one final thing which is also quite cool. Let's say that at the point that he hits the ball here, we want to fire off a freeze frame. So just here we're going to have a freeze frame. The Retime Controls offer a great way of us being able to add a freeze frame. Simply add a speed point at the point we want the freeze frame to happen, and then what we're going to do is right here we're going to again change it and change it to freeze frame. And now you can see has happened here is we've got our normal section, we've got our slow motion section, then it starts to speed into the downswing fast, then it freezes. And these red lines, obviously there's no forward moving arrow, it's just a red static line, and that shows us that the clip has stopped. And that's going to freeze frame and then play forward again and then go back to normal speed. And again, what we can do with this, if we wanted to, we can simply grab the top handle and drag it backwards. You see that it's staying as a freeze frame, and all we're doing here is just changing the length of that freeze frame There we go. So it's going to almost like it's going to take a picture. You could then have maybe, I'm just thinking, a flash effect sort of happen here. So like if you have a picture taken and then it carries on. So let's have a look here. Slow, fast freeze, fast and off again at normal pace. So there we go. Now you will have noticed that of course this clip itself was not filmed in a high frame rate. So if I go up to the inspector and click on file, you can see that this file was 29.970. So the frame rate is not a high frame rate. And as a result of slowing it down by 50%, what's happened is we've got some nasty stuttery looking non-smooth slow motion. So we can fix that by using optical flow, and we looked at optical flow in the last video. But again, coming up to inspector, making sure the clip is selected, press video, and then scrolling down until we see retime and scaling. If you didn't want to scroll down, you could just hit this little icon here, which simply pops the box out and shortens the timeline. So from here, my retime and scaling is all set to project settings, and in this case my project settings are set to nearest with standard faster frame interpolation. So that's obviously why it's not doing its normal good work and getting it to a point where it's a little bit smoother. So what I want to just show you is if we change these retime processes from nearest, I'm going to change it to optical flow. And if you're using your playback render cache as smart, you'll get a little red line here which will appear. It will go blue when it's finished rendering that particular clip. So there we go, that's rendered out now, and we can see it now with optical flow on. Much nicer. The smooth motion is much better than it was before, but we've still got some sort of slightly jaggedy motion and a bit of weird sort of artifacts and blurring going on there, so it's not ideal. So what we can now do is change the motion estimation from standard faster, which is what it's set to by the project default, to something else down the line. Now speed warp is incredibly intensive, and as far as I'm aware it requires the neural engine as well, so you may not have that option if you're not on the studio version of Resolve. If I've got that wrong, then let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But you should have at least access to Enhance Better. So I'm going to click on Enhance Better in this case. What will happen is the clip will need to re-render. Again, depending on how fast your system is, might be faster or slower in the rendering process, but you can see now what happens here. Much better. That slow motion is looking a lot nicer now overall, so we're pretty happy with that. Again, still a little bit of artifacts going on, a little bit of weirdness. So let me just show you what the speed warp actually does too. It takes a lot longer to render, so I'll just speed this process up. Okay, so now we have that rendered out. We're using optical flow and speed warp. You see what the kind of results we get now look like. Really good. And what you can see here is that we've basically just done some really cool retiming. We've done some speed ramping, and we've used optical flow and speed warp, and actually on a clip that isn't even high frame rate has got a really nice looking result. There's always going to be some motion blur in this golf club because this wasn't shot at a high frame rate and it was probably shot with a low shutter speed. So again, not bad at all. But one thing I would say is if you're using speed warp, wait to the very end to put that feature on, because otherwise it does tend to slow things down. And if obviously you make any amendments, it's going to need to re-render. So now you know how to perform a speed ramp in DaVinci Resolve 17, and I hope you can put this to good use in your very next project. Do you have any questions or comments regarding speed ramping, or anything, to be fair, that we've covered over the channel recently? If you do, please leave these in the comments section for me below, and I'll do my very best to come back to you. Of course, supporting the channel on Buy Me a Coffee will get you a faster response from me, so please consider supporting the channel or becoming a member there, as it does hugely help me dedicate more time to answering your comments and making more DaVinci Resolve tutorials that you'd like to see. Thanks so much indeed for watching all the way up to the end of the video. I really do appreciate you stopping by, and as your reward, you'll get a couple of suggestions on the screen in just a second of some other videos that you might also like to watch. If you'd be able to click on one of those, that'd be awesome. I'll see you there. But if not, time to love you and leave you, and I'll see you very soon. Take care.